Hi, and welcome to another episode of Friday Night Knits. I am filming this at nighttime, so forgive the lighting. I'm going to try to turn myself. Oh, there's some interesting lighting there. And turn myself so that way you can see my face a little bit more and get a little preview of what's happened behind me. So for this particular video, it's not going to be too long. I just wanted to share with you some final thoughts about a project I just finished most recently, and it's called the Croissant Sweater. That is what I'm wearing right now. The Croissant Sweater is the most recent pattern published by Veronika Lindberg that calls for a light fingering and two strands of lace held together so you can get a DK weight yarn. With this particular pattern, you have a 19 stitch row gauge, no, stitch gauge. Ooh, you get a 19 stitch gauge and a 24 count row gauge. And I was successful at getting the gauge with the pattern when I initially started it. So let me take you back with me before I tell you about the pros and cons about why you need to buy this pattern, and hopefully you can share with me on Instagram as well as with Veronika Lindberg about how much you love it too. So with that said, I initially started knitting this pattern using my Camilla Fiberco yarn that I picked up from Pick Up Every Stitch. I bought about 4 or 5 skeins of this. I honestly don't remember. It's been about almost 3 years now, and I wanted to hold it together with my Knitting for Olive. I have this beautiful ballerina pink yarn that I thought would pair perfectly with this because this is like a little ballerina pink too, and I wanted this pink all over cable sweater. That was what I was envisioning, right? Go ahead and get started on it, and I'm not feeling it. It's something about the fabric and the way that the color is pooling. It just is not really meeting my interest, but I wanted just to keep trucking along. Then the unexpected happened. There was an error in the pattern, and it was a pretty big error where not so much where you had to stop what you were doing, but if you had made it to that point, you would have had to frog back a little bit, or if you made it past that point, you definitely were going to have to frog back, or just take the hit. Fortunately, most of the testers were really accommodating and very flexible. No one gave Veronika a hard time. It was just a little error with the chart, and as soon as it was brought to her attention, she immediately corrected it. And the great thing is that the error was pointed out on like in the early days. I want to say it was like day 3 or 4 at the latest, when the error was noticed by one of the testers. And then each one of us were doing a different size, and so we were able to identify if that error was also in our size chart as well, and if it was, she was able to make the correction, and if it wasn't, you were able to move on. So there were certain charts that were perfectly fine, and there were other charts where it needed to be corrected. The great thing is she implemented all the feedback that was given to her by her testers, which doesn't happen often by other designers. Heck, it hasn't always happened with Veronika Lindberg. I remember for the Salty Days sweater, we gave feedback about that chart C, and if you knitted that sweater, you know what I'm talking about. And she took some of the suggestions, but not all of them. Hopefully, it has been updated. I have not made the sweater since doing the test knit, and that's the other thing. I've had the wonderful opportunity of testing for Veronika Lindberg several times, and so I understand her pattern design. I'm consistently on gauge with her, and all in all, I just love her work. I really do, and I've talked about it endlessly on there, so I'm not going to waste your time with it. I want to talk to you about this croissant sweater. I'm going to take a little sip of my water from my Etsy purchase that I got the knitter. It's so funny. I don't know why, but that is me. I will keep knitting until, but anywho, I digress. So with this particular pattern, when I realized that the Camilla Fiberco was not going to make the fabric that I was hoping for, I took a slight break. I took about 3 or 4 days off, and while I was taking that little break, I worked on my sister-in-law's cardigan, as well as some other projects I had in my yarn room too. And then when I was feeling inspired, I decided just to go ahead and try a different yarn. And I'm so glad that I did, because this is absolutely stunning. So the yarn I decided to go with, the garment I'm wearing right now, this is CC Wool. This is their brand American U. The colorway I selected was Storm, I want to say. I selected 2 colorways, which we're going to get to as well. And so yes, so this is the colorway Storm. And I also accidentally purchased Winter. or yeah, I think it's called Winter. But it's another grayish yarn that I thought would match, and it didn't match. But anywho, I digress. I held this, excuse me, I held Knitting for Olive, a Dusty Violet together. Now, I love purple. Purple is one of my favorite colors. I love really bright electric purple, but I'm just not ready to wear or buy as many garments or yarn with those particular colors or make something for myself. So I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone and just do what comes naturally to me. It's wear purple. So this was my little lean into it. I held it together with one of my favorite colors. I love gray. So how am I going to go wrong with purple and gray? This is perfect. And I'm so, so happy with the outcome. Like it just looks chef's kiss. Love it. So immediately, as soon as I cast on the collar, which I decided to fold down, which you can wear up or you can fold over, I knew that this was the right pattern for me and that I was happy with the decision with the change of the yarn. So that was the thing I'm so proud of. After I made some additional changes and tweaks, I realized that the fabric wasn't quite getting, it wasn't the outcome that I initially was hoping for. So I went up a needle size. So the pattern calls for you to use a 4.5 millimeter needle and a 3 millimeter needle. I decided to go up to a 5 millimeter needle when I was doing the Camilla Fiber Co. and realized that this is not going to work, which is why this is all frog and put together. And for this sweater, I used a 5.5 millimeter needle, and I'm glad I did that because using the 4.5 and the 5 millimeter, it was just too stiff. But once I went up to the 5.5, it was much looser. And so I went ahead and changed my initial size selection, and I went down to a size large in order to make sure I stayed on gauge. So I was really proud of myself for making that decision and doing the math in order to make it work. And it fits perfectly. It's enough ease where it doesn't feel like it's snug to my body, but not so much where I feel like I'm lost and swallowed in this sweater, which is not the most comfortable fit. I have other sweaters that fit me like that, and I don't wear them very often because I feel swallowed up in it. So this was a good choice with that. And the final thing I wanted to talk about, just about my own specific experience, is about utilizing your tools. Now, this is a very intuitive pattern where if you are someone who's comfortable reading your knitting and that you can recognize when you need to do a crossover when you're doing your cabling or a basket weave as here in the middle, then you are going to do very well with this. However, sometimes we do need a little help, a little reminders. So there were two tools I used to help me be successful with this. The first tool I helped my that I used, especially for my sleeves, was a item I purchased from Twice Sheared Sheep, and so it's one of their little round or row counters. Absolutely love it, and I use this primarily for my sleeves. Occasionally, I used it on a body, but it was primarily for my sleeves. The second tool that I used to help me be successful with this was was a knitting companion. And so what I love about the knitting companion, if you notice, there's always the numbers on the side. So that helped me keep up with where I was at with the chart. So I knew exactly what number I was on, and I just hit it. And if you buy the upgrade version of it, and if you do the setup properly, you can actually speak into the app and it will go to the next row for you. It's really dope. I've done it a few times, but I was too lazy to do it with this particular um, pattern. There's a word. I'm like, where's my words? Anywho, so I was really glad about utilizing those two tools, and I think that's the reason why I have so much more consistency with this sweater. Out of all the all over garments that I have, texture garments I have made, there's always been some some hits as well as some misses. And with this one, I only have really one big obvious miss, and that's here, right here. So it was late and I was getting so close to the end of the body. I was watching the second Avatar movie and I was like, you got to do it. You're almost there. And the movie was done and I was still not finished with the body. And I was like, I am not going to bed until this body is finished. So I even put on the documentary of Avatar just to get there. And because I wasn't paying as much attention, I was watching more of the documentary than what my knitting was doing. I forgot to do one of the cable rounds for the front, but I did it for the back. So that little mistake happened. But one thing I do like about it is that one, I probably will be the only one that noticed, and two, it will also help me make sure that I put on the right direction, because that is definitely something I have a habit of putting it on the wrong direction. Another thing that can help you make sure you don't put on the wrong direction are the German shirt rows. So in this particular pattern, it does have German shirt rows in order to help for a little nicer fit, which I think is the reason why it fits so nicely on my body right now. So I was really pleased with that outcome, despite making the little mistakes, because I should have used my tools. So use your tools, pay attention, and don't keep working on this if you're sleepy. So that's all I wanted to say just about my direct experience. Just a couple of little things I wanted to mention before I say goodnight. Number one, with this particular pattern, I'm so glad I stuck with it. It was one of those patterns where I was feeling a little discouraged. I didn't think I was going to get it done. And then I was working on another textured garment as well. So it was literally like every other day working on my sister-in-law's cardigan and working on this one. But I'm really proud of myself for persevering. This was one of those garments that showed me the power of perseverance, because when you pay attention, your cuffs are going to end up the same length, your sleeves are going to end up the same length. There's going to be consistency. Like I had the same amount of decreases on both sides of the arms, which is something I usually don't. Usually my sleeves are always mismatch. Even when I knit two sleeves at a time, I can have mismatch. That sleeves and I we're just not as compatible unless I'm doing seaming, a seaming sweater, which I haven't done in a few years. So that's one of my favorite takeaways from this experience, that it really tested my knitting grit, to like really persevere, because I was feeling fatigued from doing all the texturing and cabling, and I just wanted to get the cardigan done so I can give it to her for Christmas, but I also wanted this done so I can have it in the winter. And I did not think I was going to get this finished at all. With the test knit for Veronika Lindberg, she understands if you don't finish the entire sweater by the end of the test call, which I want to say was either December 31st, or maybe it was before that. Maybe, honestly, I don't remember the exact date it was due, but I was definitely pushing it. But fortunately, I was able to get to the midpoint of the body where I was a little bit past my navel right before I made my mistake. And I was able to have one sleeve almost done. I only had just the cuff finish. I had finished all my decreasing, or the bulk of my decreasing, where I could give enough feedback. And that was the other thing. I was able to, this was probably the most conversational I have been in a long time in a test knit. I was constantly offering my 2 cents about what people should use, what color yarn they should use, or and whether or not I saw something that looked really great that they posted in a picture. I was like, keep it up. I was trying to give words of encouragement. And then I was also giving feedback about the pattern experience I was having as well, about where to make things a little bit clearer, especially if you're new to knitting. I always try to go into these test knits as someone with new to knitting eyes, so that way knitwear designers can recognize that maybe some of the language that they're using is not as clear. So depending on how they're going to market this pattern will determine who's going to gravitate towards it. And that is my final thing. I definitely encourage those who are an adventurous beginner or intermediate knitter to go for this pattern. It is something you can do without using a cable needle. This is definitely something that if you have that beautiful woolly wool that you're just itching to cast on, this is definitely the perfect garment to do so. And then finally, if you have a ton of hand-dyed yarn and a ton of mohair, I say go for that as well. Or you can be like me and make an Aran weight sweater that ended up being a little bit lighter weight because you went up a needle size. You can do that too. In the end, I'm really glad that I was invited to do this test knit. And even if I wasn't, I definitely, this is a pattern I would have purchased just to have in my own collection. And I'm glad that I did. It is stunning. So much, in fact, that I don't feel as much motivation to do the Arctic Light, because this is giving me that heirloom vibe, which is the Arctic Light. The Arctic Light has this beautiful heirloom fancy sweater vibe to it, and this is giving that vibe. I don't know if it's the halo of the mohair or the way that the cables are situated in various parts of the sweater, but it makes me feel elegant in it. I cannot wait to wear a beautiful pair of dangling earrings or a nice pair of hoop earrings, maybe jazz up my ponytail. My hair is longer, so I don't know how to do it anymore. I'm used to being bald. But anyway, I digress. And I can also wear this with a nice pair of dress slacks and some heels, or a skirt or some heels. I don't, I'm not doing either of those. My days of wearing heels are out the door. If you hear my sons in the background, that they're the reason why. But anywho, I just know I'm going to feel comfortable in this. Like it's going to be a hard time taking this off tonight, but I'm so glad just to do. God, they're so loud. I'm so glad to have an opportunity to come online this evening just to share with you about my croissant sweater testing experience. Check out the pattern. I highly recommend it. I am not the best knitter. There are definitely some rooms for improvement, to make things a little bit more consistent and do a better job with yarn management, because I was freaking out. I thought I was going to run out of yarn. I was nowhere near running out of yarn. It's called do the math, Rachel. Do the math. And so you're good at doing math. And if you could just follow simple directions, you're going to do perfectly fine with this pattern in itself. So if you got some DK weight yarn or some figuring weight yarn with some mohair that's just waiting for you to put it on the needles, I say go for it. In the end, you're going to love the pattern. And finally, if you are someone who's already started the pattern and you're feeling a little stuck, because once, I'm not going to lie, once you get past splitting for sleeves, it's like, oh, I still got to do the whole body. Stay motivated, because it's such a beautiful pattern and you want that final parted. And so it can feel a little sluggish, but I would say just keep on keeping on. And I promise you, you're going to have one of the most beautiful sweaters in your wardrobe that you are never going to want to take off. Thank you so much for joining me this evening on Friday Night Knits and hearing about my testing experience in knitting the Croissant Sweater by Veronika Lindberg that is available to you on Ravelry. Have a good night.